Dear brothers and sisters, in the last khutbah, we talked about the trial that we are exposed to in not knowing the wisdom behind the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't know why Allah does certain things at certain times to certain people, or that's why certain events occur in certain places in a certain manner. We don't know the hikmah, the wisdom behind that. Our knowledge is limited. We don't know the hikmah and the wisdom behind many of the legislations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed for us. And I mentioned that in the previous khutbah. But still, human beings have the audacity to object to Allah's hikmah and Allah's choices, although they know that their knowledge is so limited. In the last khutbah I showed, and I mentioned the hadith, it's authentic hadith, when Al-Khadr told Musa alayhi salam, when Musa could not comprehend the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Al-Khadr to do certain things, Musa objected to these things that Al-Khadr was doing. How could he do such evil things? When he made the hole in a ship, or when he killed that boy, or when he fixed the wall for those misers in that village. Anyhow, Musa alayhi salam did not know why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands the Khadr to do certain things. And the Khadr to teach Musa that we cannot really object to the actions and the choices of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He told him, when he saw that bird take a small sip from the sea, he said, if you add my knowledge to your knowledge, to the knowledge of all humanity, it cannot compare to the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even as much as that bird took from that sea. In today's khutbah I mentioned in Arabic that this not only relates to the sum and quantity of knowledge, but also to the types of knowledge. There are probably many kinds and categories of knowledge that we don't even know that they exist, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only knows. Categories, not just amount. So don't think that you know all, that the knowledge that you know is all the knowledge that is out there. Allah's decisions and choices are based on His knowledge. If our knowledge is limited in amount and in quality to that small drop compared to the seas that are continuously being replenished by the rivers and by the rain and so on and so on, how can we even think to challenge the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or His choices or His wisdom? I mentioned in the previous khutbah and in this khutbah that a human being is so ignorant and oblivious even towards his own body and his own soul. And today I gave examples from not the whole human body and the sciences that are included in this human body, not the sciences that are included in a system such as digestive system or nervous system or circulatory system or so on, or even an organ such as a heart or the eye or the liver or even a cell. Today I only talked about a small structure within the cell. That small structure is the DNA that is within the nucleus of the cell. A very small, minute thing that is within inside us, that humanity remained for tens and maybe hundreds of thousands of years not knowing that it even existed within them. It was only discovered in 1865, and even the scholar or the scientist who discovered it, 1869, Frederick Meisger, he did not know what the purpose of that DNA was. Only until 1943 did they, human beings, start to know that this was to store the information and to control everything within the cell and everything within the body of the human being. How much DNA do we have inside us? We as human beings, an adult human being has 100 trillion cells. 100 trillion. A trillion is one with 12 zeros in front of it. That's what my kids told me. If I'm wrong, you can blame them. I asked them before the khutbah. But even if I'm wrong, please correct me. 100 trillion cells in each human being. And each cell has a small nucleus on the inside. If you take that DNA, it's a strand. This strand in one cell, in one nucleus of one cell, is 6 feet long. Imagine that. 2 meters long in that small cell. It is actually confined in a small space. It is curled up upon itself in a small space that is less than 0.09 micrometer. Not millimeter, micrometer. How small is the micrometer compared to a millimeter? Is it divide by 10 or divide by 100? Again, I didn't even ask them. I didn't dare to ask my children about this one. You can tell, you can see it for yourself. Anyhow, if you connect the DNA in all the cells in one human being together, it will stretch from here to the sun and back 600 times. Human being, one human being. How much knowledge is in this? If you wanted to store all the digital information in all the computers and on the internet, which basically contains all the human science, all the science that humanity has reached is on the internet, it's now digital. If you wanted to store it, you only need 2 grams of DNA. Only 2 grams of DNA to store all the humanity, all that humanity knows. Now, this DNA is formed of bases, 4 bases: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. And only adenine can only connect to thymine, as you know, A to T, and then cytosine and guanine, C to G. They don't interconnect. So you only have these 2 variants, A and T, A to T, and then C to G. So only these 2 variants. And through these 2 variants only, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes all these differences between all these different human beings. All the features in your body and in your soul, your mind, even your level of intelligence, your height, your color, length of your hair, the quality of your hair, everything about you, the color of your eyes is made by the variations of these 2 pairs. But you have to know that human beings in general, the DNA they have in common and identical is 99% of the DNA. All these variations are through the variation in 1% of the DNA in the human being genome. Imagine that. Not only that, but this whole DNA, only 1.3%, I think in Arabic I said 0.3, 1.3% of this whole DNA is responsible for these features. The rest of the DNA controls that 1.3% for transcription and so on and for repair. The DNA is so fragile that it's being damaged every single day, even by the sun rays, the ultraviolet rays. How many times a day? They say thousands, probably millions of times a single day. And Allah has created this mechanism in your cell to repair your own DNA. A DNA is almost like a living organism inside the living cell, because it can replicate itself. It can read itself. It can make copies of itself. It can translate itself into proteins and so on. Human beings have 50% DNA in common, even with a banana. A banana and a human being. What is common in feature between a banana and a human being? Almost nothing. But still we have 50% DNA in common. 92% DNA in common between us and a mouse. Imagine that. If you are able to type as fast as 30 words per minute, and not too many people can do that, how much time do you need to type all the information in the DNA, the human genome? You would need 100 years. Imagine that. That means if you are able to actually recite it by a rate of, let's say, because you can't type this fast, 30 words per minute, you would need 100 years to speak out this information. Imagine all this knowledge that we didn't even know about. Even till today, till I read all this, and I'm a physician, I didn't know all this information. Okay? We have to know the limitation of our knowledge. Allah's decisions are based on His knowledge, not our knowledge. His wisdom, not our wisdom. His generosity, not ours. His mercy, not ours. And you cannot compare this to that. This is only, we talked only about the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in comparison to the knowledge of human beings. We did not really touch on other aspects that determine the decisions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His choices, such as His mercy. And I will just mention one hadith to you about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prophet ﷺ told us that Allah created in this life, created for human beings, mercy, and He divided it into 100 parts. Allah stored 99 parts for Yawm al-Qiyamah, and only provided one part of this 100 parts of mercy for this life. Through this one part, all the mercy that human beings have amongst them and all the animals have amongst them, even according to the hadith, even the insects and the small creatures that look after their offsprings, and the mercy within the family and between friends and mother and father and children, and all this is through that one part. There's 99 stored for Yawm al-Qiyamah. يَتَرَحَمُ بِهَا الْخَلَائِقِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. And this is only the created mercy. This is not the mercy that is the feature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The mercy that is a feature of Allah is endless and limitless. But this is what Allah created for human beings to use in this life and to use amongst them, because يَتَرَحَمُ بِهَا يَرْحَمُ بِهَا عِبَادَهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. And this is the mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for human beings, the 99%. So 1% is in this life and 99% Allah stored it for human beings to provide for them on the day of judgment, and so on. Inshallah, we'll stop here.